All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Blazer, Mr. Neufeld, Mr. Scheck. People represented by Ms. Clark, Mr. Hodgman, and Mr. Kelberg. Jury is not present. The record should reflect that earlier this morning the court had a brief chambers conference with counsel off the record as the court wanted to determine the course of our proceedings today. I understand Mr. Shapiro is going to be offering the testimony of Detective Vannatter, and I understand that the prosecution is going to resist recalling Detective Vannatter. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right. I'll hear the proffer from Mr. Shapiro. Good morning, counsel.
Good morning, Your Honor, and thank you very much. Your Honor, we asked the court to allow us to recall Deputy Philip Vannatter based on newly discovered evidence. Detective Philip Vannatter, based on newly discovered evidence that was provided to us last Friday by Mr. Hodgman of the District Attorney's Office in chambers with Your Honor. And that basic information concerns statements that are attributed to Deputy Vannatter made in the presence of at least 3 people who say they heard the statements and 2 other people who were present who may or may not have heard those statements. And those statements were made in January and February of this year. The first statement concerns a conversation that took place with Detective Vannatter, Detective Lang, Deputy District Attorney Davidson, Larry Fiato, and Craig Fiato. They were meeting in a hotel room going over testimony for presentation on behalf of the witnesses for the district attorney in a homicide case known as the Christie case.
What's the present status of the Christie case?
You're going to have to inquire with the district attorney, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
What is the present status of the Christie case?
The last I heard was that the case is nearing completion. In fact, I believe they were resumed on Friday. It's in Judge Flynn's court.
So this actually, because let me put it all in context.
Yeah, okay.
There were 2 defendants who were convicted February of this year, I believe. And then 1 defendant set for retrial who has just completed the retrial in Judge Flynn's court.
All right.
Almost completed the retrial. I think it's still in litigation.
All right, thank you.
A conversation allegedly took place in a hotel room where Detective Vannatter was allegedly quoted as saying by Mr. Larry Fiato that regarding the O.J. Simpson case, we went over to Rockingham because he was a suspect. The husband is always a suspect. He was interviewed upon getting that information in the last week or 2 by Mr. Hodgman and Mr. Kelberg, and he made those statements to these members of the district attorney's office in a tape-recorded interview. He then...
You're saying that Mr. Larry Fiato confirmed the report of that statement having been made back in January or February?
Correct.
Okay.
He also said that at a later time, perhaps in February of that year, he was having a cigarette on the 18th floor in an area known as the smoking area with Detective Vannatter. And at that time, Detective Vannatter repeated the same phrase that O.J. was a suspect and the husband is always a suspect. 2 other people came out during that conversation. One was Craig Fiato, who confirms that he heard Detective Vannatter say those words. And the second is Special Agent Wacks, from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They were also interviewed by Mr. Hodgman and by Mr. Kelberg, and in their interviews, Mr. Craig Fiato indicated that he had overheard that conversation, and those words come from Detective Vannatter, and Agent Wacks also says he heard those things come from Detective Vannatter. Finally, the investigator on the homicide case, on the second homicide case, is Investigator McLean, and he was interviewed, and he says that he had a conversation with Special Agent Wacks regarding the same issue. Apparently, how this came to the attention of the district attorney was that Mr. Craig Fiato was working on a special involving organized crime with a network investigative journalist for ABC. And just the next day after he had the conversation, a story came out that the defense was going to call a mystery witness. At that time, he thought he was going to be that mystery witness, so he called up the FBI agent who is his handler, who works with him, Agent Wacks, and told him about it. Agent Wacks then reported that to his supervisor, and eventually it was reported to the district attorneys, who met in chambers with Your Honor outside of our presence, went ahead, did their investigation, and have turned over that material all to us. So the essence of this testimony is that Your Honor has already made a finding regarding the credibility of Detective Vannatter on a search warrant that he signed under penalty of perjury. And in that case, Your Honor has found that Detective Vannatter demonstrated a reckless disregard for the truth in offering testimony under oath for the purpose of securing a search warrant. The jury, however, has not heard, nor will they hear that testimony. But the jury is going to have to judge the credibility and bias of Detective Vannatter. And in that endeavor, the jury now is entitled to know whether or not Detective Vannatter was untruthful to this jury when he said the purpose for going over to the Rockingham estate was to make a notification to Mr. O.J. Simpson, and because of the welfare and well-being of the children, that he was a concerned grandfather and he was concerned for the children of O.J. Simpson. We have always questioned that motive. We've questioned it throughout in all of our motions, and he testified before the jury on 3 direct occasions to questions by Deputy District Attorney who was questioning him at that time, that O.J. Simpson was not a suspect. We have specific quotes that I've given to Your Honor. 3 specific questions in a row. Are you saying he was not a suspect? Are you sure he was not a suspect? You did not go there because he was a suspect. Is that correct? I followed up on that line of questioning on cross-examination and asked him that question 4 times. And finally I asked him, it sounds like you've memorized this answer. So there was no equivocation whatsoever. Further, as an offer of proof, we have Detective Vannatter's testimony before the grand jury under oath in this case, and that testimony was that the reason they went over was because they wanted to make a notification see if I can get, it's on page 326 of the grand jury. Detective Vannatter testified under oath. The purpose was to make a death notification and arrange for the children. And then at the preliminary hearing, Detective Vannatter was again asked those questions by Ms. Clark and myself. He responded, we went to OJ's to check on his welfare, the next of kin to the children. And then he goes on to say, if suspect, it would have been a tactical situation. We would have placed officers around the residence to secure it, and they obviously didn't. The purpose was to make a death notification and arrange for the children.
All right, Mr. Shapiro, the problem being that you're quoting from various transcripts. I think just for the record purposes, you need to identify
Yes.
what page you're referring to.
From the grand jury, page 326 was the first statement. The purpose was to make a death notification and arrange for the children. From the preliminary hearing, volume 8, page 35 and 36, they went to OJ's residence to check on his welfare. Page 104, about the next of kin to the children. And in volume 9, page 14 and 15, Detective Vannatter talks about that if the suspect, if he was a suspect, it would have been a tactical situation, and therefore he would have placed officers around the residence to secure it. He didn't do that. Now, to put it in terms of its legal significance, the conversation with Mr. Larry Fiato, the two conversations with Mr. Larry Fiato, took place prior to the time that Detective Vannatter testified before this jury and testified in direct contradiction to those statements. So it is a prior inconsistent statement that Detective Vannatter is making. The second area that we would like to examine Detective Vannatter on is the code of silence. And this becomes particularly important for several reasons. First, that in presenting the evidence that I've just talked about to Your Honor, both Larry and Craig Fiato talk about the fact that this is going to be discoverable, and there's no reason to make a big deal of this, and let's just keep it quiet, and why is the FBI so worried about it, and if they don't say anything, nothing will happen, but if they do, it's going to become very, very significant. Then Detective Vannatter, on at least 3 occasions, has talked to witnesses that we have retained that are witnesses who are employed by government agencies and who generally testify for the prosecution. And we would offer as an offer of proof that Mr. Larry Regal would testify that Detective Vannatter came up to him and criticized him for testifying for the defense, saying you're a cop and cops stick with cops. He gave that same type of view to Dr. Baden and Dr. Wolf, that they were employees of government agencies, and how could they come testify against the police in a criminal homicide case. That's the second area we'd like to get into. The third area is an area of clarification regarding the finding of the brown glove in the Rockingham residence. And that's just a clarification of earlier testimony.
That's the one that was on the
table. Table in the
right. Okay.
family room. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shapiro.
Mr. Shapiro has the facts somewhat wrong and certainly has the interpretation quite extremely erroneous. Number one, the circumstances from the Fiato's perspective is as follows, and I'm going to quote Craig Fiato, who I think would be accurately characterized as somewhat of a salty figure, so pardon the language. This is all a bunch of bullshit. What he would talk to this court about is, Vannatter was there at the hotel, but Vannatter was not a part of the Christie investigation because Lang had a different partner for the Christie investigation. Vannatter just came along. At some point, these guys are just, again to use Craig Fiato's term, just bullshitting, just shooting the breeze. And some statement is made by Vannatter to the effect of Simpson being a suspect, the husband's always a suspect. And it was a nothing statement. It was said in the course of a bunch of guys, quote, bullshitting, unquote. Like Phil Vannatter's going to lay out the prosecution's case on O.J. Simpson to Craig and Larry Fiato, who are, quote, mafioso-type people who have turned government witnesses. Okay? That's the context in which this statement initially is supposedly said. The statement is allegedly said to Larry Fiato and overheard by Craig Fiato. It was of such great significance, Mr. Davidson has no recollection of it, and Mr. Vannatter says, I wouldn't say something like that to the Fiatos, but if I talked in any sense, could be talking in general terms about homicide investigations, or could be talking about, as the court is well aware, allegations have been made against the police throughout this case by the defense, that the Los Angeles Police Department has done a conspiratorial act to convict an innocent man. And so in response to some kind of comment, for Vannatter to say sarcastically, you know, something like, yeah, sure, we went up there. Simpson was a suspect. The husband's always a suspect. The context is not that Vannatter made a statement saying, we went up there, Simpson was a suspect. That's not the way it'll come out if the court hears from the Fiatos. Number two statement, on the smoking deck. And it's because, as the court is well aware, the rules in the criminal courts building, so people who wish to smoke have to do so outside the interior walls of the building, and there are areas exposed to the outside where they can go, I believe, on the 18th floor. The Fiatos are here in February as witnesses in the retrial that Ms. Clark correctly identified as the retrial of, I think, the remaining defendant from the first trial. And in the course of a smoke break with Larry Fiato, out on the smoking area. Craig Fiato is not present for this conversation. He is not a percipient witness to this. Agent Wacks comes into the middle of something, and all he hears is a statement from Vannatter to the effect of, we didn't go up there trying to save lives, we went up there because Simpson was a suspect. Now, in our interview, I participated in one interview with Mr. Hodgman of Agent Wacks, and there was an earlier interview. I was not a party to it, and I wanted to have a personal opportunity to speak with Agent Wacks, and that's why there was a re-interview. Agent Wacks said Vannatter was sarcastic in his tone and perfectly consistent with someone who's saying, yeah, you know, they're accusing us of all these things. Sure, we went up there. Not to save lives. Sure, we went up there because Simpson was a suspect. And these accusations have been made against Vannatter. Now, when you put all of this in context and you remember the immortal words of Craig Fiato to Mr. Hodgman and me at the conclusion of our interview, that everybody was making, again the language of Craig Fiato, a fucking big deal out of stuff that was bullshit. What he was pissed off about, his term, was that he made a call.
Glad you qualified that.
Thank you. My mother might be watching this, so I would like at least to make a decent impression. He called, this is 9 months later, he called this man, Vic Walters, at ABC, who apparently is working with him on some possible deal, book, movie, I'm not clear. Unrelated to Simpson, has nothing to do with it. And Mr. Fiato is a little ticked off with Detectives Lang and Vannatter because of what he believes to be comments they made to another person about whether that person should be associating with Craig Fiato. So, Mr. Craig Fiato tells Mr. Walters allegedly what Vannatter said. And then what he does is he tells Agent Wacks, who's picking these guys up to take them wherever they're going,
that he talked to this guy Walters, and Agent Wacks goes, not berserk, that's not an accurate characterization, but he had a definite reaction. And the reason, as Wacks has told us, for this reaction is because after watching this trial and seeing the media coverage and seeing the spins that are put on things and the way that things are taken out of context that are nothing, he was worried that that is exactly what would happen here. Exactly what Craig Fiato was concerned about when he told us that this was all a bunch of BS that was being taken way out of context from what it was. But Agent Wacks, no code of silence. He reported it to his supervisor, and out of an abundance of caution, it was reported to our office. They're not sitting on information. People want to characterize this as Brady material. Hey, that's for the DA, the defense, and the court to worry about in Simpson. Not our problem. We're turning it over. Let them do with it. And that's when Mr. Hodgman alerted the court. That's when I was asked with Mr. Hodgman to participate in investigating these materials. We have turned over what we have acquired. And what you get down to as a bottom line is the context in which any of these statements was made is certainly not one of seriousness. It is not conveyed as seriousness by the Fiatos. It is not remembered by the participants because it was not a significant statement. If the Fiatos wanted to make something of the O.J. Simpson case, as Craig Fiato said, they could have done a lot better job than just to make this statement. And they're the ones who are saying, this is a bunch of BS. We're going to have a trial as to what, in fact, was said. And more importantly, even if a statement or statements were said, what was the context and meaning? Now, with that, if I may have just a moment of not a moment of silence. I may need that too. Just so it's clear, Mr. Hodgman suggests I point out, the original trial with multiple defendants in the Christie case was in February. There was one defendant on which the jury could not reach a conclusion. That is the retrial in Judge Flynn's court going on right about now, and that's why the Fiatos were out here being picked up by Agent Wacks, where this statement is ultimately heard, because everybody on the 18th floor from all these cases have to wander in some common areas, and that's how it was heard. Incidentally, I have to also point out, Craig Fiato would say that he deliberately embellished on what had actually occurred as he's telling this to Wacks to, quote, pimp him, unquote. And that at the end of all this, Agent Wacks says, you prick. That's the context of all this, Your Honor. Now, how about a little bit of the law before I talk about the code of silence? This is nothing about the code of, let me turn it around. This is nothing about the code of silence. The FBI came forward with information because what Agent Wacks heard initially, with no context provided, but in the sarcasm in which it was said, was obviously nothing of significance to him. That's what he's told us, and that's what the evidence would support. And what he then did when he heard, oh, the media may get this, the media may put a spin on this, is he did report it. So that at least in a bureaucracy of which the court is aware, I'm sure the Federal Bureau of Investigation is, our office is, and so forth, the supervisors want to know these things, because the last thing they want to do is turn on their TV set at the 6 o'clock news and hear some story about what one of their employees allegedly heard or said and has become a witness in the, quote, case of the century. So it was reported and turned over. There is no code of silence. This is completely irrelevant to establish any aspect of the so-called code of silence. Now, with respect to the law, the simplest case to read, I think the court is well aware of it, is People versus Lavergne, Lavergne, 4 Cal 3rd, 735, starting at page 742. Just factually, you have a bunch of defendants who are charged with robberies. One of the defendants gets a deal and is going to testify at the trial of the others. first question on cross-examination of...
About the stolen car?
Exactly.
All right.
And the law, so the court knows the facts. The law, from page 742, the defense sought to impeach Oliver, the accomplice, on what the trial judge correctly noted was a collateral matter. The fact that the car was stolen had nothing to do with the facts at issue in the trial, et cetera, et cetera. While collateral matters are admissible for impeachment purposes, the collateral character of the evidence...
What page are you referring to, counsel?
I'm sorry?
What page are you referring to?
742, Your Honor. While collateral matters are admissible for impeachment purposes, the collateral character of the evidence reduces its probative value and increases the possibility that it may prejudice or confuse the jury. Flipping to page 743, California courts have, in cases similar to this one, held the court's exclusion of collateral facts offered for impeachment purposes to be a proper exercise of the trial judge's discretion. And in fact, they go on to say on page 743 how it appeared that the defendant in the Laverne's case on cross-examination purposely elicited the testimony for the very purposes of impeaching the witness with this collateral information, and that was not appropriate to do in order to allow the impeachment to come in as collateral matter.
But that's not the circumstance in our case, is it?
No, that is not the circumstance. I just wanted to point out how the Supreme Court has gone to even point out that one cannot deliberately try and create the situation and then argue that now that the situation is there, the party should be allowed to impeach.
But let me ask you this, Mr. Kelberg. The justification for the probable cause to conduct a warrantless search is pretty significant determination that has to be made, although albeit not in front of the jury.
That's the interesting point. I wasn't down here to conduct the examination of Detective Vannatter. I must say, Your Honor, from my perspective, I would have objected as irrelevant, as the court is well aware, as you've just stated, that issues going to search and seizure are irrelevant for the jury's consideration.
But the initial examination elicited on direct examination, giving an explanation for going up to Rockingham, was elicited by the prosecutor.
And I understand that, and that's why I cite the Laverne's case. I don't think that Ms. Clark or Mr. Darden, whoever did the examination, elicited that with the expectation that 9 months later, we'd be down here with the Fiato brothers and everybody talking about it.
I would say that's a safe assumption.
But the point is, Your Honor, in deciding whether it's collateral matter or not, the fact that it was brought out, but is not what I think is controlling. What is controlling is its relevancy to the issues before the jury. It is not relevant. The issues are relevant, if at all, on search and seizure issues. This does not go to code of silence. This does not go to impeach Detective Vannatter on any relevant point. And the important thing is the circumstances of this statement, the clarity of what was actually said is going to be in dispute. It is not clear from everybody's account what actually was said. The only thing that is clear from everybody's account is that this was not a serious conversation. This was a bunch of guys at the hotel BSing, and the statement on the smoking deck was nothing more than BS and Wacks' interpretation, a statement said in sarcasm, and he only heard the segment. He didn't hear what came before. He didn't hear what came after. May I have just a moment with...
Certainly. Any brief response, Mr. Shapiro?
Yes, Your Honor. As the court has correctly pointed out, these questions were brought up by the district attorney in their direct examination of Detective Vannatter. And the reason they were brought up is because the district attorney decided early on that they were going to be very defensive in their presentation of the case. And since we had let them know in opening statements that we were going to be talking about a rush to judgment, this was their way of diffusing a rush to judgment. So they brought that up. Second thing regarding Mr. Craig and Larry Fiato. These two men have been embraced by the United States government, by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, by the United States Department of Justice, and by the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. They have been acting as informants. They have been vouched for as informants by all of those people as being credible. They have been acting in that capacity since 1983. They are personally responsible for at least 50 to 60 people being convicted based primarily on their testimony. When Craig Fiato talks on the tape of this being BS, he is not talking that Phil Vannatter is not telling the truth. He's saying, why is everybody making such a big deal out of this? This is making a mountain out of something less than a molehill. This really is not that important, and this is really going to embarrass us. This really puts us in a bad position, because now the police who we depend on for a living are not going to like us. It's very, very interesting. Detective Vannatter was not a stranger to Mr. Craig Fiato. They had met before, and Detective Lang had worked with them before. They had testified previously, 6 months before. They had testified previously, I believe, for them, but at least had worked with them before. And this issue really came up because of Denise Brown. And Craig Fiato told Mr. Kelberg and Mr. Hodgman that he was having an affair with Denise Brown. And the district attorney's office was embarrassed by it. And that members of the district attorney's office called this to Denise Brown's attention, that members of the Los Angeles Police Department called this to Denise Brown's attention, that they were being embarrassed. And this irritated Mr. Craig Fiato, because he didn't think that was fair, since he now, and for the last 12 years, has considered himself an integral part of law enforcement. So that's the reason that this issue came up. And what happened was Craig Fiato never told anybody about this, because he knew it had great potential damage to the district attorney and their case. And it was only when, fortuitously, ABC was interviewing him on an organized crime show that at the same time there was speculation of a mystery witness, and he thought, oh my God, ABC must have called up defense attorney Robert Shapiro and told them about this, and therefore they're going to know and embarrass us, so I better turn it over to Special Agent Wacks, who took the appropriate position. So that's how it came about. There is no question, based on the interview of Craig Fiato, based on the interview of Larry Fiato, and based on the interview of Special Agent Wacks, that Detective Vannatter on 2 occasions said he went to O.J. Simpson's house because he was a suspect. The husband is always a suspect. They repeat that consistently. It will be up to the jury to determine what weight to give that testimony, not whether or not it is admissible. Contra to Laverne, which has been taken and not properly cited to Your Honor as authority, Laverne involved extrinsic impeachment. This is direct impeachment. This is directly contradicting from his own words exactly what was said. And so there is no doubt about it. Here are the questions that were initially put to Detective Vannatter before this jury.
It's already in the record. You read it to me once.
I'm sorry?
It's already in the record.
No, I did not read the direct testimony at the trial. I read the testimony. I just said at the trial it was said 3 times. May I just, for the purpose of the record, read one excerpt? I think.
You should just give me the page site. We're talking about specifically volume 109, 19266, correct?
Correct, Your Honor. And I have given Your Honor 12 pages. If we could mark this as an exhibit and attach it as part of the record.
Well, I mean, that we're referring to the record that is in existence. We don't need additional paper.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, counsel.
Clearly, this is perhaps the best evidence in this entire case of credibility of a witness. And the theme of the defense, in large part, has to do with credibility throughout this case. And if we can demonstrate, as we clearly will be able to, specific and direct impeachment of a lead detective who has testified under oath on 3 different occasions that that testimony was not correct, that testimony was untrue, and that the true facts are, as probably most people would believe, that 4 lead detectives did not leave Bundy because they didn't want to investigate a murder scene and they felt it incumbent as goodwill ambassadors to go notify Mr. O.J. Simpson of the tragedy regarding Nicole Simpson, and nobody was left all day to investigate anything, and that's why this case is in the posture it is right now. I don't think any clear-thinking person could ever believe that. But furthering that all 4 people now went over there and did not consider Mr. Simpson to be a suspect is something that I don't think any trier of fact would find credible. It's essential evidence for the defense.
All right, thank you, counsel.
Your Honor, could I briefly set the
No,
record?
no, I've heard the legal argument. Thank you. All right, what we have here is a proffer of a statement by Detective Vannatter alleged to have been made to a Larry Fiato, a Craig Fiato, and FBI Special Agent Wacks that appears to be a statement that is inconsistent with his testimony here in court before the jury. As such, it would appear to be a prior inconsistent statement as defined, and I believe it's 1235 of the Evidence Code. I think it is a material issue. The explanation for the trip up to Rockingham, and I don't find it to be collateral. And I'm going to allow the defense to present the inconsistent statements by Detective Vannatter. Having said that, I am going to deny the request to go into Mr. Regal, Dr. Bodden, and Dr. Wolf, because I find the proffer is not of sufficient weight to go forward into that avenue of inquiry. And on the explanation that there is a clarification question on the brown glove and its location, I will allow that. However, that strikes me as a 3-question area. Mr. Shapiro, how do you, in light of the court's ruling, Mr. Shapiro, how do you propose to proceed under 770?
Yes, Your Honor. First.
All right. We may get to the point where it will become redundant or cumulative.
And Your Honor, I think the court is aware there was a request. We have representatives, or a representative, I think we lost the second representative from the United States Attorney's Office concerning a protective order dealing with the Fiatos as witnesses. And in the event either one of them is called, I think that order has to be dealt with.
All right, Mr. Shapiro, after Detective Vannatter is recalled, who do you anticipate calling?
Your Honor, depending on his answers, we would anticipate calling Larry Fiato, Craig Fiato, Special Agent Wacks, Deputy District Attorney, again, depending on answers, Davidson, Mr. McLean, and that would be our testimony. But
All right.
for sure, well, I shouldn't say for sure,
Well,
based
please-
on testimony.
Please, when you evaluate who you're going to call and in what order, my concern that it will become cumulative quickly.
Yes, I understand that. Your Honor, I've also talked to Mr. Eglish of the United States Attorney's Office, and we are not going to oppose the protective order.
Mr. Kelberg?
And one last thing, Your Honor, for clarification, is this still part of the defendant's case in chief? Because there will be rebuttal evidence offered to this aspect of the evidence.
All right, I did not make a ruling on that aspect, but clearly the record supports this as newly discovered evidence since it was disclosed to the defense just last week. And since it was not available to the defense during what would normally be their case in chief, I will deem it as such, meaning the people have the right of rebuttal.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, we don't have the jury down, so we'll take a 10-minute recess, bring the jury down, and we'll start with Detective Vannatter. All right. Let's have a quiet. Sure. Record should reflect that we've now been rejoined by Mr. Simpson. All right, Deputy Trial, let's have the jurors, please. And let the record reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for the delay. Had a few legal matters to take up out of your presence. We're ready to proceed. Mr. Shapiro.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. I'd like the court to kindly ask to recall to the witness stand Los Angeles Police Department Detective Philip Vannatter.
All right, Detective.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the trial shall be before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat on the witness stand and state your first and last name for the record.
Philip Vannatter, Philip Vannatter.
Detective Vannatter, on March the 16th of 1995, did you previously testify before this jury?
I believe that was the date, yes.
And were you asked questions on direct examination by the district attorney regarding your reasons for going from Bundy to Rockingham.
Yes.
And have you had an opportunity to review that testimony?
I know what I testified to, yes.
Have you had an opportunity to review it since the time you testified?
To read the testimony?
To review it in any way?
No, I know what I testified to.
Have you gone over that testimony with anyone?
No, I have not.
Have you talked to either Mr. Kelberg or Mr. Hodgman recently about the credibility of that testimony?
Objection, Your Honor, as to the characterization.
Sustain, rephrase the question.
Have you talked to Mr. Hodgman or Mr. Kelberg recently about the testimony regarding why you went to Rockingham?
I didn't talk to him about that, no.
Was that discussed during a recent conversation with them?
The reason I went to Rockingham? No, it was not discussed.
Did they question you about why you went to Rockingham? Well, let's put this in perspective. Were you called in to give a tape-recorded interview to Mr. Kelberg and Mr. Hodgman within the last 10 days?
Yes, I was.
When was that?
I believe it was last Friday.
Did you give a tape-recorded interview?
I did, yes.
Was that under oath?
I don't think I was put under oath. I was interviewed on tape.
And was the subject matter of why you went to Rockingham discussed?
That's in the context of the interview, yes.
Now, I want to direct your attention back to your trial testimony on March the 16th and ask you, sir, if you were asked the following questions and given and gave the following answers to this jury under oath. And I want to, I've given Mr. Kelberg a copy of this and Your Honor a copy of this.
Mr. Shapiro, are you going in the sequence?
Yes, yes. Okay. We're going to go now to page 19169. This was a question that was directed to you by Mr. Darden. Now, we have heard testimony that Commander Bushy ordered Detective Phillips to notify Mr. Simpson personally. Answer, that's correct. Question, okay. During that discussion, did any detective voice any opposition to scaling the wall? Answer, no. Question, at that point, did you consider Mr. Simpson a suspect in the murder of Nicole Brown and the other man? Answer, no. Question, you told us that Detective Furman cannot convince you of anything. Answer, well, it would be, I would take an independent look. I don't think I would be convinced of anything by anybody outside of my own. Do you recall being asked those questions by Mr. Darden?
Certainly,
Do you recall giving those answers?
certainly.
On page 19265, were you asked, do you recall being asked the following question by Mr. Darden?
Excuse me, Your Honor, I object to having this read. If counsel wants to go into alleged inconsistent statements, that's what I understand the witness to be here for.
Oral.
Now, you earlier told us that Mr. Simpson was not a suspect while you were at Bundy. Is that correct? Answer, at what point are you asking, sir? Okay. Well, after your first walkthrough at Bundy, was he a suspect? Answer, no. And when you first arrived at Rockingham, was he a suspect? Answer, no. During the time that you were ringing the buzzer at the front of the property, was he a suspect then? Answer, no. And when you rang the front door at Rockingham, was he a suspect then? Answer, no.
Mr. Shapiro, are you going to go on that page?
I'm turning the page.
Are you going to a different...
Proceed, counsel.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. At some point in time, did you consider him a suspect? Answer, absolutely yes. And at what point in time was it that you considered him a suspect? He became a suspect as soon as I saw the glove at the side of the house. It appeared to be a match to the glove, the opposite glove to the glove I had seen earlier at Bundy. Do you recall giving those answers to those questions regarding...
I don't believe that's the complete answer to that question, counsel.
That's all I have here, Your Honor, so if there is more...
There's a continuation to that.
Answer, he became a suspect as soon as I saw the glove at the side of the house. It appeared to match the glove, the opposite glove to the glove I had seen earlier at Bundy, and then after coming out of the driveway and finding the blood trail, he became a very strong suspect. Do you recall being asked those lines of questioning when Mr. Simpson became a suspect?
Certainly I do.
And did you give those answers?
I certainly did.
And on page 19519, this is cross-examination by me, where you asked the following question. Your purpose in taking 4 officers to go to the Rockingham estate was solely for notification. Is that correct? Answer, our purpose for taking 4 officers was actually twofold. Number 1, they could direct us to the location because Furman had been there before. And number 2, we intended on them helping us with the notification, helping Mr. Simpson to make a disposition of the children for us to meet Mr. Simpson for a later interview. Do you recall being asked that question by me and giving that answer?
Yes.
Page 19536, questions by me. To put this in perspective, 4 detectives are now taking turns pushing the buzzer device on the gate. Answer, well, I think there were 3 of us that rang it. I don't recall of Furman ringing the bell. Question, now Furman's role in coming there was purely to show you how to get there. Is that your statement? Answer, no. Question by me, was he coming as a backup unit for you? Answer, no. Question, was he coming to help you investigate? Answer, no. Was he coming to introduce you to Mr. Simpson? Answer, no. Question, was he coming to help you in the notification? He was coming, we were going to make the notification, and he was coming to assist Mr. Simpson if he needed assistance. Question, and he had volunteered for that? Answer, no. We asked him to accompany us. Do you recall being asked those questions and giving those answers?
I recall that line of questioning. If you're reading verbatim from the transcript, yes.
And do you recall, finally on page 19537, that, to put this in proper context, you were talking about the difference between an emergency situation and a tactical situation, and you gave this answer. If I would have had a tactical situation and knew that I had a suspect, or knew that I had a hostage, or knew that I had a murder suspect in there, it would have been handled totally differently. This was a situation where I was worried that something had occurred there, possibly like had occurred at Bundy. Do you recall giving that answer?
Yes, I do.
And finally, I said finally, but on page 19709, at some time, you wanted to interview Mr. Simpson, and you say, yes, at some point. My question was, well, did you consider him a suspect at that time? Answer, no.
Your Honor, there is a difference in the page numbers between what Mr. Shapiro has from his printout
Why don't you give me the actual dates?
We're still trying to find the last.
The other?
All right, we'll correct that later, but
Did you have any notion at all that time that, and answer, I didn't know who the suspect was? Anybody could have been a suspect at that point, okay? Did you give those answers?
Yes, I gave those answers.
Is there any doubt in your mind that you conveyed to the jury under oath that when you went to Rockingham, Mr. Simpson was not a suspect?
There's no doubt in my mind, Mr. Simpson was no more of a suspect at that point than you were, Mr. Shapiro.
And you gave that same testimony before the grand jury under oath?
That's absolutely correct.
And you gave that same testimony at the preliminary hearing under oath?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
In January of 1995, were you in the company of an individual known as Craig Fiato, a deputy district attorney Dale Davidson, an individual Larry Fiato, and Detective Tom Lang?
Yes, I was.
Is that hotel located in the downtown Los Angeles area?
No, it's not.
Where is that hotel located?
There's an objection.
sustained,
Just general area, so for
Sustained.
reference.
not relevant, somewhere in the Los Angeles area.
And at that meeting were you aware that Larry Fiato and Craig Fiato were brothers?
I was told that, yes.
And had you had known that your partner had had previous dealings with them?
I
Is
had
that correct?
previously met them prior to that meeting.
And your partner had previously dealt with them?
My partner was investigating a case that involved them, yes.
How many times had you met them before?
I believe one time.
And at some point in time, you were aware that Denise Brown
Sustained. It's not relevant.
You were aware that both Larry and Craig Fiato were certified as reliable informants for...
Sustained. Legal conclusion, counsel. The issue is a statement.
Was there any discussion about your role in the O.J. Simpson case in the presence of those individuals?
There was a lot of discussion from Craig Fiato, yes.
Did you have any part in the discussions regarding your role in the O.J. Simpson case?
I think I responded to some questions that he asked me regarding the testimony that he had seen at the preliminary hearing, yes.
And they told you they had watched your testimony on television? Did Mr. Craig Fiato tell you he'd watched your testimony on television?
Yeah, the gist of his conversation was he was talking about the difference in personality of myself and my partner. That was the gist of the conversation.
During that conversation, did you state that you went to the home of O.J. Simpson in the early morning hours of June the 13th, 1994, because he was a suspect?
Did I state that exactly? No, I did not.
In sum and substance, did you convey to anybody in that room that the reason you went to the O.J. Simpson residence was because he was a suspect?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
No, I did not. There was general conversation going on. If something was taken out of context or something was said in jest, I can't answer to that. I never said that O.J. Simpson was a suspect. O.J. Simpson was not a suspect when I went to the Rockingham location.
Did you say that of course he was a suspect, the husband is always a suspect?
Mr. Shapiro, no, I didn't say that. Anybody that has personal contact with a murder victim before they're eliminated is a potential suspect and can be a potential suspect. I wish I was good enough to go to a crime scene and within less than an hour be able to figure out who committed a murder. That would be great.
Did you state that the real reason was not to save lives, but because O.J. Simpson was a suspect, the husband is always a suspect?
The real reason was not to save lives. I went to the location to make a death notification, to make a disposition of 2 small children, minor children, that were in police custody, and in the furtherance of my murder investigation.
Do you know a special agent from the FBI by the name of Wacks?
Yes, I've met Mr. Wacks.
And how did you come in contact with Mr. Wacks?
Because Mr. Wacks is associated with the Fiatos, and I met him through my partner, who is investigating and working on the case that they're all involved in.
How is he associated with the Fiatos?
I believe, my understanding is he is a special agent from the FBI that was working with the Fiatos in a undercover operation. That's my knowledge of it.
And how long had the Fiatos been working with the FBI?
Sustained.
Do you have any information as to how long the Fiatos were working with the FBI?
Sustained. Sustained.
And during February of this year, were you up on the 18th floor with Larry Fiato?
Yes.
And did you go out on the balcony with Larry Fiato for the purpose of smoking a cigarette?
Yes.
And did you have a conversation with Larry Fiato and in that conversation discuss the O.J. Simpson case?
Larry Fiato was asking questions about a lot of things. I have not specifically discussed the O.J. Simpson case with anybody.
And
I don't discuss my murder cases with anybody other than people that are involved in the case.
And did you tell Larry Fiato that you went to Rockingham because O.J. was a suspect? The husband is always a suspect on the 18th floor of the balcony while smoking a cigarette in February of this year.
Again, if something is taken out of context, I don't have a specific recollection of making that statement. I don't believe I did make that statement.
Are you saying you didn't make
May I
that
finish my
statement?
answer, please?
Please.
Yes.
Any person, again, any person that has personal contact with a murder victim is a potential suspect until they're eliminated, until the investigation is completed. He may have taken something out of context. I have no recollection of making that statement. That is not a true fact. I went to the location to make a death notification and a disposition of 2 minor children.
And you went to that location with 4 of the only lead homicide detectives and ignored the investigation of Bundy, and your testimony is for the purpose of only making a death notification. Is that your testimony, sir?
Sustained. Sustained.
When you say you don't have a recollection of saying it, are you telling this jury you did not tell Larry Fiato that you went to Rockingham because O.J. Simpson was a suspect?
I'm saying I would never say that because O.J. Simpson was not a suspect at that time. O.J. Simpson became a suspect after I was shown the glove by Mark Furman and after I saw the blood drops in the driveway. That's when he became a very strong suspect. Up to that point, he was not a suspect to me.
During your conversation with Larry Fiato on the 18th floor in February, did Special Agent Wacks from the Federal Bureau of Investigation come out?
Well, he was out there a number of times.
And was he in a position to overhear what was being said in that conversation?
Well, he,
Sustained.
How large an area is this?
it's a very small area.
How large?
Well, it's
Describe
very
it to the
small.
jury.
It's maybe 6 foot by 6 foot, maybe 7 foot by 7 foot.
How close did Special Agent Wacks get to you while you were talking to Larry Fiato?
Well, there were many times that we were out there. Everybody is in a small confined area.
Did Craig Fiato also come out during that period of time?
I don't recall ever seeing him out there.
Are you saying he didn't come out?
I'm saying I don't recall ever seeing him out there. I don't believe he ever was out there.
A moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Why did you go to the hotel to meet with the Fiato brothers in January?
Because I was requested to accompany my partner to that location.
For what purpose?
My partner informed me that he and Deputy District Attorney Davidson were going to interview them regarding their testimony in a upcoming trial.
Why were you going?
Because Detective Lang is my partner, and he asked me to go with him.
Were you going there to work on the case?
No, I wasn't working on the case.
Were you going there to keep him company?
I think I answered the question. He asked me to go along in case he needed any kind of assistance. I accompanied him there.
Right, this is not particularly relevant.
I just have one more moment, Your Honor. Did you, Detective Lang, Detective Phillips, and Detective Mark Furman all agree to testify that O.J. was not a suspect when you first went to Rockingham?
Sustained.
Isn't it true that from the moment you learned about the circumstances of Nicole Simpson's death,
Sustained. Proceed.
Vannatter, I want to go into one other area just to clarify other testimony regarding glove that you seized at Rockingham, if I might direct your attention in that area. As the lead detective in this case, was Mr. Simpson's residence searched for clothes, shoes, gloves, or anything else that may be significant to your investigation?
Yes, it was.
And other than a pair of socks and tennis shoes, were any other items of clothing seized?
Yes.
Was a brown glove identified as Los Angeles Police Department number 94 seized from Mr. Simpson's house?
I know a brown glove was seized. I don't know whether it was item 94 or not, but I know a brown glove was seized.
Is that the glove that was displayed in the videotape shot by Willie Ford?
I believe so, yes.
Were any black... Let me just, one moment, please. I'll show you the glove that was seized that's been marked as an exhibit. Brown leather glove that's been previously marked
Do I need my glasses? Do I need to read anything?
as an Exhibit 609. Is that the glove that was seized?
It would appear to be, yes.
Detective Vannatter, were any black leather gloves seized from the Simpson residence?
There were 2 additional pair of gloves seized from the master closet on June the 28th. I believe one pair of them was black, yes.
And that was not a leather dress glove, was it? That was a ski glove?
The additional gloves that were seized?
Yes.
No, they were totally different than a leather dress glove.
Okay. Were any black leather men's dress gloves seized?
As I recall, the additional gloves that were seized were heavier than what I would consider a dress glove. They looked like they were cold weather gloves that a person would wear skiing or when they were really in cold weather.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Kelberg?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, and I'll be brief. Detective Vannatter, just to go on this area first, and then we'll go back to the conversation issue. Were there any other ski caps, knit ski caps, seized from Mr. Simpson's house in the search for clothing and so forth?
You know, I would have to refresh my memory on that. I believe there were additional caps that were seized or were observed in the master closet.
And caps of a knit ski cap variety?
Yes.
Would it be accurate to say that other than this single glove, the exhibit number I have to say I did not catch?
609.
Thank you, Your Honor, 609. Was there any heiress glove recovered at all from the residence of Mr. Simpson?
No.
Now, going back to this other issue, you had testified at the preliminary hearing as a witness, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
How did you feel about the manner in which you were examined by Mr. Shapiro at that preliminary hearing?
Oral.
How did I feel about it? Well, I thought he was a little antagonistic, and I was trying to tell him the truth, is all I'm trying to do now.
Have you, as a result of the exposure of this case, felt that you have been falsely accused? You, as a Los Angeles Police Department officer, have been falsely accused of entering into a conspiracy to convict an innocent man, Mr. Simpson?
Objection. Leading.
Oral to cross-examination.
No, he's called as an adverse witness.
Oral.
You bet I have. I've dedicated over 25 years of hard service to this city. And I've done a lot of work, and I've seen a lot of people murdered, innocently murdered. And I've attempted to do the best I can to come to successful conclusions on those.
Next question.
And, sir, have you expressed your frustrations at any time since the trial began about the accusations that have been leveled against you?
Objection. Irrelevant. Beyond scope.
Oral.
You bet I have, yes.
And in the manner in which you have expressed such frustrations, please tell us what you have done or said.
Well,
Hold on, that's a vague and overbroad question.
All right. Have you expressed verbally your frustrations to accusations specifically about the police conspiring to frame O.J. Simpson?
yes, I have.
Sustained.
Have you...
Answer stricken. Counsel, let me see at the sidebar with the court reporter. How's your paper? All right, thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Vannatter, just to set the scene correctly, the case that Mr. Lang was going out to talk with Mr. Davidson and the Fiato brothers was not a case for which you were one of the investigating officers, is that correct?
That's correct.
That Detective Lang had had a partner at the time of that particular incident by the name of Mac McLean, is that correct?
Well, no, I don't think that's correct. I think that was way before he started working with Detective McLean. I believe his partner at that time, and I believe the case is a 1982 case, I believe his partner was a detective by the name of Souza when he actually first got the case.
And subsequently, did you find that he was working with Detective McLean on the case?
Yes,
And then you became his partner, is that correct?
that's correct, yes.
Now, in the course of being here for the Simpson case, in January and February, was the case for which the Fiato brothers were witnesses also going on in the same building?
That's correct, yes.
And our offices are, among other places, on the 18th floor of this building?
Yes, sir.
And from your experiences, has it been common to see witnesses from a lot of different cases wandering around in common areas?
Many, many people are up there, yes.
And because of the code regulations, smoking is not permitted inside the building, is that correct?
That's correct.
So if people want to smoke, from whatever case they may be coming to the building for the purpose of being witnesses, they've got to go to designated areas, is that correct?
They've got to be in the outside, yes, that's correct.
And would it be accurate to say that that is where you and Larry Fiato would spend some time smoking cigarettes?
That's correct, yes.
Now, going back to the, just the initial finding at Bundy, would it be accurate to say that you saw no evidence which, in your 25 years of experience, led you to believe Nicole Brown Simpson was the victim of a rape?
I didn't even know what her cause of death was at that point. All I knew was that the two victims appeared to have massive injuries. I didn't even know what the cause of death was. How could I make a determination on anything?
Did you see any evidence that indicated to you there was a robbery?
Nothing. Again, I had a very brief walkthrough by Ron Phillips, who pointed out certain items of evidence. And I couldn't, at that point, answer that question because I didn't know what had occurred there.
Did you see any evidence that caused you to believe there had been a burglary?
The front door of the residence was standing open. That was a possibility. I didn't see any ransacking, but again, I only got a real brief walkthrough.
Now, in your experience, have you found that where women who have been either the wives or ex-wives have been in a relationship with a man, either a married relationship or a living relationship, that when such a woman is killed, that statistically the killer is most commonly associated with the husband, the ex-husband, or the live-in?
Nope. Only one person makes objections, and I'm hearing too much noise over here. The objection's sustained. Rephrase the question.
Detective Vannatter, in your experience, may I have a moment, Your Honor? Detective Vannatter, bottom line, if you thought Mr. Simpson was a suspect when you first are going from Bundy to Rockingham, number one, would you have told that to this jury?
You bet I would have.
Would you have told it to the judge at the preliminary hearing?
Yes, sir. You bet I would have.
Would you have told it to the grand jury?
I would have told it to anybody that asked me.
Is there any reason in your mind why you would not have said that if that is in fact how you honestly felt at that particular time?
That is not a true statement. I wouldn't say something like that. The truth of the matter is, Mr. Simpson was not a suspect. I went there to make a death notification and a disposition of 2 minor children. That was my purpose for going to that location.
And wouldn't you agree, sir, that it would have been very easy for you to say, if you wanted to, that Mr. Simpson, of course, was a suspect, if you wanted to?
Sustained. Speculation.
I have one more moment.
Certainly.
Detective Vannatter, when you were with the Fiatos, Detective Lang, and Mr. Davidson, did you joke around with these people?
Yes.
If somebody characterized it as a bunch of guys bullshitting at times, would that be an accurate characterization of what took place at times during that hotel visit?
That was
Forward.
mainly my contact with the Fiatos would be characterized as that, yes.
Would the same apply to any conversations that you may have had with Larry Fiato on a smoking deck while you were here for the Simpson case and he was here for whatever case it was, he was a witness?
Absolutely, I had no business with him whatsoever.
Did you ever speak seriously to Larry Fiato about the Simpson case?
Absolutely not.
Is there any reason why you would speak seriously about the Simpson case to a witness on another case?
No, I don't talk to anybody about the particulars of my murder cases.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Shapiro?
Would you agree, Detective Vannatter, that it would be improper for a lead detective to talk about anything regarding a pending case with anyone else other than law enforcement, officers, witnesses, or prosecutors?
I don't know that I would totally agree with that because everybody in the world has been talking about this case. I never had any specific conversations with anybody regarding this case other than my partner, my supervisors, the district attorney's office is prosecuting the case. And witnesses, when you interview them, you have to ask them specific questions. I do not discuss specifics of any case with anybody that does not have a need to know what those specifics are.
And have you ever made the statement, the husband is always a suspect as it relates to the O.J. Simpson case?
Your Honor, it's been asked and answered.
Sustained.
Is it your testimony that the only four investigating homicide detectives were at the Bundy crime scene and all four left for the sole purpose of making a notification of to O.J. Simpson and for taking care of his minor children?
It's been asked and answered.
It has.
Thank you. Nothing further.
I have nothing further.
All right, Detective, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. A document has just come down to me, refresh the witness's memory about something that I asked initially. Could I just take a look at the document?
Yes.
May I ask that the witness be allowed to be recalled?
All right, Detective.
And may I be allowed to reopen my cross
All right,
on
why
a
don't you
very
show,
limited area?
why don't you show this document to Mr. Shapiro so he knows what we're talking about?
Do we have an extra copy? Detective Vannatter, showing you a document, does that appear to be a Los Angeles Police Department property report listing various items recovered from Mr. Simpson's residence?
Yes, sir, it does.
Would looking over that report refresh your memory regarding what, if any, additional ski knit caps were recovered?
Yes,
And would you please do so?
certainly. Item 95 was a navy blue watch cap, knit cap.
And is there also item number 98?
That's correct. There was an additional one. Item 98, a watch cap navy blue in color.
And the additional gloves that were recovered, are they also identified on this form 99 and 100 are the item numbers? That is the one other,
Yes.
ones other than the exhibit that you were shown.
Yes, sir, they are.
And what description can you give us regarding those?
Item 99 is 2 gloves, brown in color, native deerskin. Item 100 is 2 gloves, leather, black, made in Western Germany.
And they were neither set of gloves Eris, is that correct?
No, sir, they were not.
And this is the only Eris glove, this exhibit, that was recovered from Mr. Simpson's house?
That's correct, yes.
One moment, please.
Clark tells me that the jury has not seen this glove. Could I pass that to the jury?
All right, this is previously 609.
I think that's the number you gave me, Your Honor.
Yes, it is.
May I pass it to the jury?
You may.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Mr. Kelberg, would you collect that from Deputy Long, please? All right, the records reflect that each of the jurors has had the opportunity to examine People's Exhibit 609, which appears to be a brown leather glove. Mr. Shapiro.
Detective Vannatter, so we're all clear. This brown glove is the only glove of a dress description that was found inside O.J. Simpson's residence. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
And this is not the same glove based on lining, stitching, and other material as the gloves you've described as the gloves found at the murder scene.
That's not the same glove as the Eris Light. No, it's not.
And the other gloves that you found, the men's black gloves, were found in a ski closet with other ski equipment. Is that correct?
As I recall, they were found in the master closet in the bedroom.
Were they separated by ski equipment?
Well, as I recall, the clothing in the closet was very orderly, and I believe they were separated with other gloves, and everything in the drawers were separated in a orderly fashion.
Are you sure they were not found in a ski closet with ski clothes that belonged to both men and women and children?
I'm not positive of that because I was not the one that actually recovered them.
And isn't it a fact that a knit ski cap similar to the one you've described at Mr. Simpson's house was also found inside the residence at Nicole Brown Simpson's condominium?
I wasn't there. I have been told certain things, and I don't know that I can answer that question, but
Right, he wasn't the one who recovered that.
You're aware that one was found there, are you not?
Well, he's the lead detective. Are you aware of that, Detective?
yeah, I was told by my partner that a child's cap was recovered from the children's bedroom at Bundy, yes.
Did you try on that cap for size?
Did I?
Yes.
No, sir, I did not.
Are these generally one size fits all caps?
Well, I think there's caps made for children, and I think there's caps made for adults, yes, and they're a stretchy knit material, so they would probably fit anybody that wanted to pull them on their head, yes.
Fact that the ski cap that was found at Nicole Brown Simpson's condominium is the exact same size as the ski cap found at O.J. Simpson's house, and you refuse to take it?
Objection, Your Honor. Both compound, leading, and assumes facts not in evidence.
Assumes facts not in evidence. Phrase the question.
Has a comparison been made with the size of the ski cap that was found at Nicole Brown Simpson's condominium and the one that was found at O.J. Simpson's house?
Clarification area, you know.
Inside, I was corrected, inside Nicole Brown Simpson's condominium and at O.J. Simpson's house. Were those compared to see if they were the same size?
You're asking me questions that I have no personal knowledge of. I was not there when that cap was found.
As a lead detective, did you ask to see for a comparison of those caps?
Well, I believe my partner was there. He would have handled anything that would have had to been done. And you keep referring to lead detectives. We work as partners. We're both responsible for the same thing.
And
So,
you talk to each other?
oh, every day, yes, he's a friend of mine.
And did you ask him whether a comparison was made?
I don't know that I ever did.
Thank you.
I can honestly answer that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kelberg?
I think I can confidently say, Your Honor, maybe
Thank you.
must be excused.
Thank you. Detective, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, next witness.
The next call, the court pleases FBI agent Michael Wacks. Court pleases.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there's a matter I need to take up out of your presence before we call the next witness. Let me ask you to step into the jury room, please. Record reflect the jury has withdrawn from the courtroom. Counsel previously this morning was indicated to the court that the United States Attorney, as counsel for the FBI and other interested parties, was going to make an application to the court to modify the terms and conditions of news media coverage of this case if, in fact, one party or the other was going to call either Special Agent Wacks and/or Mr. Fiato, Larry Fiato, or Craig Fiato.
I wasn't sure that it included the special agent. I thought it included the Fiatos. Perhaps counsel can.
Morning,
Yes,
counsel.
Your Honor. Good morning. Beverly Reid O'Connell, Assistant United States Attorney on behalf of the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. The federal government made an application requesting two different safeguards for the testimony of Special Agent Wacks and the Fiato brothers. First, the government asked this court to consider turning off the cameras to protect the likenesses of the Fiato brothers, who have assisted the federal government in investigations, testified against Italian mafia members.
All right,
and-
counsel, I've read
Okay.
your application.
The second inquiry was to limit the substantive questioning of Special Agent Wacks and the Fiatos to exclude certain areas, including identifying characteristics of the Fiatos, investigation techniques of Italian mafia organized crime done by the FBI, and methodology of the FBI with respect to infiltrating organized crime. So there are two limitations, one with the cameras, one with respect to questioning of Special Agent Wacks.
All right, are you objecting to the televised coverage of the testimony of Agent Wacks?
No.
All right.
I have no problem with that. I don't think the FBI has anything to hide, and I didn't think it included him.
No, some law enforcement.
Right. I didn't think it
officers
included.
have undercover
Right.
capacities.
I didn't think it included FBI agent Wacks, and we have no objections. We indicated that if they want to turn the cameras off from the Fiato brothers, fine.
All right.
We
All
would
right.
like, Your Honor, just if I might,
Yes.
an opportunity to talk to the FBI agent Wacks for a minute before he takes the stand. However, we have his reports, but we've not been able to talk to him. Is that possible?
No objection from the federal government, no.
All right. Okay, we'll take 10.
Okay, is he? Where is he? Okay, see if we can talk to him, and we'll let you know, Your Honor. You ready, sure?
All right, we'll take 10-minute recess. See how far we get. Mr. Cochran.
Thank you very kindly, Your Honor. We'll next call to the stand FBI agent Michael Wacks, Your Honor.
Right.
Raise your right hand, please. You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the trial containing before this court should be the truth and whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. please have a seat in the witness stand and state and spell your first and last name for the record.
It's Michael F. Wacks, W-A-C-K-S.
Mr. Cochran.
Mr. Wax, you're here today pursuant to subpoena, is that correct?
That's correct.
And by whom are you employed, Mr. Wax?
I'm a special agent with the FBI.
And for how long have you been so employed?
It'll be 24 years this October, or 25, excuse me.
And you're presently assigned to the Los Angeles office?
Yes, I am.
Now, are you acquainted with two individuals by the name of Larry and Craig Fiato?
Yes, sir.
Approximately how long have you known these individuals?
I've known the Fiatos since approximately 1982.
And in what capacity have you known them since 1982?
Sustained.
You've worked with them over the course of the last 12 or 13 years, is that correct?
Yes, I have.
Now, they've been witnesses for the government during that period of time,
Yes, I have.
and they've testified for the prosecution.
Yes, I have.
Now, in this matter, just a few moments ago, you refused to talk with me prior to your taking the stand, isn't that correct?
Well, I was asked by the Assistant United States Attorney if I wanted to speak to somebody in the defense, and I said no.
Yes, well, that happened to be me.
Well,
You
I didn't know
refused to
that,
talk to
sir.
us. Well, it wasn't personal, I'm sure, but
No,
you,
no, sir.
you refused to
Wait,
talk.
wait.
Sorry. Okay.
You know the drill. Don't talk when the lawyer's asking you the question.
And I know the
And
drill.
you know the drill.
I know the drill, Your Honor, and I'll remember the drill.
All right, thank you.
You refused to talk to the defense, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Right. And you previously talked to the prosecution on at least two occasions, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
On September 14th and also on September 16th, is that correct?
I believe it was Tuesday and Friday, yes.
All right, now, sir, when the Fiatos have come to California to testify on cases, have you been out here kind of looking out for them when they come here and testify?
Yes, sir.
And they've been to California to testify on a murder case down the hall in this building. How many times this year?
They've been out at least 3 or 4 times, I believe.
All right, I want to direct your attention back to the month of February of 1995. Remember that particular month?
Yes, sir.
And on that month, did you have occasion to walk out on a landing on the 18th floor of this building during the middle of a conversation between Larry Fiato and Detective Phil Vannatter?
Yes, sir, I did.
And Detective Phil Vannatter is the gentleman who just preceded you to the stand, is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you walked out on this landing, first of all, I want you to describe for the jury who was present on this landing.
When I walked out, there was Detective Vannatter and Larry Fiato.
And were they the only two there?
Yes, sir.
And this landing, is this an area where people go to smoke outside of this building?
Yes, on the 18th floor.
Do you know how long these two individuals had been out there before you went out there?
I believe it was only a matter of minutes.
A short time?
Yes, sir.
And you were there in furtherance of your duties of kind of looking after the Fiato brothers, is that correct?
Partly. I was also going out to have a cigarette.
All right, but you were up in the DA's office because you were with the Fiato?
Yes, sir, I was.
All right. Now, you still smoke?
Unfortunately,
You don't have
yes.
to- you don't have to answer that. All right. Now, at any rate, you walked out there, and when you walked out there, you heard some conversation that went on between Detective Vannatter and Larry Fiato, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Oh, well. And what you heard was you heard Detective Vannatter state to Larry, I'm calling this an
Sustained.
adverse witness, Your Honor. Adverse witness?
Proceed, not until it's necessary, counsel.
Well,
Not until there's a showing that it's necessary. Proceed.
talk to us. But, okay,
I
I'll-
understand, counsel. Ask him a question, and let's see what the response is.
All right, certainly, Your Honor.
I can't hear counsel's remarks to the court when he's so voce.
I know. Proceed.
That's all.
All right.
Should be clear.
Yes,
Proceed.
That's right, thank you. Now, when you walked out there, you heard Detective Vannatter make a statement to Larry Fiato, isn't that correct? You can answer that yes or no?
Yes.
And what statement did you hear Detective Vannatter say to Larry Fiato?
Well, I can't give you the exact quote. It was more of a comment, something to the effect of not going up to the house to save victims, and that he was a suspect.
All right, well, let me ask you specifically if this is what you indicated in your interview on September 16th, 1995 in the DA's office. Quote, "We didn't go up there with the intention of saving lives. he was the suspect. Isn't that what you said, he said?
I said that I heard something to that effect. I also said in the statement, I do not recall the exact words.
All right. Was that as close as you can remember as you sit here now?
It's something to that effect, yes.
All right. That when they went to the Simpsons' Rockingham residence, they didn't go there with the intention of saving lives, but because O.J. Simpson was a suspect, right?
It was something to the effect that we went up to the house with no intention of saving lives, that he was a suspect.
All right.
I never heard the word Mr. Simpson's name mentioned, nor did I hear the Rockingham house mentioned. I just heard house.
But you knew that Detective Vannatter was talking about O.J. Simpson, isn't that correct?
I assumed he was, yes.
Right. Because you knew from conversations with the Fiato brothers that there had been an earlier conversation in January of 1995. Isn't that correct?
Sustained.
Well,
Sustained.
let me phrase it another way, Your Honor. Weren't you aware through conversations with the Fiato brothers that there had been an earlier conversation in a hotel room downtown here? Let me finish, counsel.
Sustained. Sustained.
Well, with regard...
Sustained. It's hearsay, counsel, at this point.
All right. All right, at any rate, there was no doubt in your mind he was talking about the O.J. Simpson case, was there?
Yeah, no.
All right. In fact, you were quite surprised that Detective Vannatter would be discussing the Simpson case with Larry Fiato. Isn't that correct?
Sustained.
Were you surprised that Detective Vannatter would be discussing the Simpson case with Larry Fiato?
I was somewhat surprised, yes.
All right. That's not something you would do, is it?
Discuss the Simpson case with
No, discuss one of, well, no. You wouldn't even discuss the Simpson case with me, so I'm sure you wouldn't. But that's not something that you would do in discussing one of your cases with a witness somewhere, would you?
Normally not, no.
Now, after this conversation, after the part that you heard, you then were out on the landing with the two of them. Is that correct?
Yes, we were out there for a brief period after that, yes.
How much longer were you out there before that conversation terminated?
I would say just 2 or 3 more minutes, enough to finish the cigarette.
All right. And was there any further discussion during this particular period of time, now, the time after you arrived, about the O.J. Simpson case and what Vannatter did?
No, none at all.
All right. Was Detective Lang on this landing at any time that particular day?
No, sir.
Did Craig Fiato, Larry Fiato's brother, come out at any time during that conversation?
No, sir.
Where was Craig Fiato, if you know, during the time of this conversation on the landing?
I believe he was in the district attorney's reception area.
Right now, I want to direct your attention back to that conversation took place that we've just been talking about in February of 1995, right?
I believe it was the first week or two of February, yes.
All right, first week or two?
Yes.
Do you have a specific date for us?
No, I do not.
All right. Now, are you aware whether or not there was another conversation involving Detective Vannatter and the Fiato brothers, wherein the subject matter of going to O.J. Simpson's house took place in January of 1995? Are you aware of that? Yes or no? Nope.
Overruled. You can answer that question, yes or no. Are you aware of any other conversation?
You can answer.
I'm aware of a comment that the Fiato brothers overheard Detective Vannatter make, yes.
All right. And when was that comment?
Sustained. Foundation.
Well, now with regard to that particular comment, you said that you're aware of it. And as a result of your being aware of that conversation, are you aware of when that conversation took place, the one between the Fiato brothers and Detective Vannatter that preceded the February 1995 conversation?
Sustained.
I'm seeking to lay a foundation, Your Honor.
Proceed.
All right. Now, were the Fiato brothers here in Southern California in January of 1995?
Yes, they were.
And were they housed in a hotel downtown Los Angeles?
Sustained.
Were they in some hotel in this general area?
Sustained.
Well, all right. Was there a time when Detective Vannatter and Detective Lang and the Fiato brothers met in January of 1995 that you were aware of, sir?
Calls for speculation.
Like this.
Overruled. Are you aware of a meeting?
Yes, I am.
All
Next
right.
question.
And can you tell us when that meeting took place, gentlemen?
Sometime in January, early January, I believe.
All right. The first week or first
Yes,
2
it
weeks?
was sometime right after the Super Bowl.
Around the Super Bowl?
I believe sometime after the Super Bowl.
Well, let's see now. The Super Bowl usually takes place on the last Sunday in January.
Well, that it was my impression it was sometime around the Super Bowl. It may have been 1 or 2 weeks on the
All right,
early
Counsel-
side of January.
Counsel, we've narrowed it down to January. Is there really a precise date that's
That's
necessary?
fine. January of 1995, is that correct?
That's correct.
And at that time, this conversation that we're about to talk about, were you present during this conversation at all?
No, I was not.
And with regard to your knowledge of this conversation, would I be correct in assuming that you got the information about what was said during this January conversation from the Fiato brothers?
Yes.
They told you what had been said, is that correct?
Well, they told me about the meeting, and in the course of this meeting, what had been said, yes.
All right. And when were you told about what had been said
I
by the
believe,
Fiato brothers?
excuse me, I believe it was the next day or two, whenever I went back to the hotel to pick them up, to transport them down to testify in the Christie murder trial.
All right. And this was during the time they were out here to testify, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you ascertain whether or not there was a deputy district attorney by the name of Dale Davidson also present during that time?
I was told he was at this meeting, yes.
Stricken its hearsay, yours to disregard.
All right. Now, were you, maybe approach this for a moment, Your Honor. I may want to take a break, but I want to ask one question. I want to ask you one.
I don't think we're going to.
Yeah, all right. We're not going to
Finish.
leave, no.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our noon recess at this time. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case, conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you, or allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. We'll stand in recess until 1 p.m., and Agent Wacks, you're ordered to come back 1 p.m. All right, thank you, sir. All right, well-